Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Divorcing Religion podcast. I'm your host, Janice Selby. I'm a clinical counselor and a religious trauma recovery coach. You might recognize today's guest by her social media handle, The Glory Hole. That's WHOLE. Her background in fundamentalist Christianity, her courage to challenge inherited belief systems, and her radical act of saying no when everything in her was trained to say yes makes Melissa Duge Spiers the perfect guest for today's show. After reading just partway through Melissa's essay, A Death to the Commodity of Virginity, I was hooked. Here's what she wrote. I am not giving my virginity away. It is not a gift and it is not being taken. I am giddily destroying it, tossing it aside, throwing it out, determinedly, viciously ridding myself of it once and for all. Melissa's upcoming memoir, Holy Disobedience, won the 2021 Book Pipeline Unpublished Nonfiction Manuscript Prize, with excerpts featured in the Huffington Post. Oh, I love the Huffington Post. Welcome, Melissa. I'm so glad you could join me today.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited for our conversation.
What does it feel like to hear somebody else reading your words?
It's very surreal. It's a kind of an out-of-body experience. Right now at the process of the book, I'm getting we just got the Andrew Curbs's wrote the foreword, and I'm getting the first blurbs of people writing about the book to put it. And it's just always a little shock when you hear somebody else's opinions about your material, particularly because it's your life, right? It's memoir. But I always learn something. I learn something when I hear other people's opinions about it. So it's just an incredible journey that keeps giving in the most unexpected ways. I feel very, very lucky.
Oh, I'm so pleased because I feel certain that your work is going to hit such a chord. It is going to resonate, especially with my viewing and listening audience who are mostly recovering from religious trauma, in different forms. They come from a variety of fundamentalist backgrounds, from Jehovah's Witness to Catholic to Mormon, just everything you can imagine, Scientology. But the one thing they have in common is that it was a very high control system, and they know the costs of being in the system, and then they know the costs of leaving the system. And I think that's something you can relate to on some level. I'd love for you to take us back to your childhood and tell us a little bit about what it was like growing up and how religion impacted your life.
Sure, absolutely. So I am a fourth generation Seventh-day Adventist, ex-Seventh-day Adventist, which is an enormous fundamentalist Christian religion that nobody seems to know about. My little sub-tagline on my book is the biggest religion no one knows. It is 23 million people worldwide, which is larger actually than the Mormons or the SBC, but nobody knows of them. They are a cult, even though they protest violently against that. I mean, what cult doesn't, right? Protest violently against that. But if you go through like Stephen Hassan's BITE model, every single thing, behavior, emotion, thought, everything they control. They started out at the same time, and then I'll get into my own childhood, but it's, most people don't know anything about it, so I have to give a little overview of the Adventists. It was begun in Victorian America just at the same time. They came out of the same movement as the Mormons and the JWs, the Millerite end times thing. They are an end times cult. They're obsessed. Every generation of Adventists has thought Jesus is coming back in our lifetime and we're going to be persecuted for our faith and blah, blah, blah. Right now, they think because of Trump and everything, it's the end of the world is coming, which it might be actually, but not because of what they think. But that's a sidelight. I was there. They are a very aggressive missionary cult. And they have the third, they are, I think, the seventh richest church in the world, behind several of the Catholic churches and the Mormons. They have the third or fourth largest education system in the world, and the third or fourth, fifth, maybe, largest healthcare system in the world. So most people have heard of Advent Health or the Blue Zones. Both of those things are Adventist. And so their missionary approach has always been to sweep in to an indigent community and offer healthcare, education, build schools, teach, blah, 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 build a hospital. And then they're guaranteed lots of, very faithful little Adventists. And so that's how my family got brought in, well over 100 years ago. Was my great-grandmother was extremely poor widow trying to raise 5 children, and the Adventist church gave her a job, and they educated her children. And ever since then, they've been guaranteed a slew of Adventists. It was a really good bargain for them. So, that's...
Are they still growing?
It's interesting. They are growing technically, worldwide because of the missionary approach, but their Western Europe and Northern American membership has been declining for 50 years, and it's really in free fall. They're all freaked out that young kids aren't paying attention to it anymore, and gee, I wonder why. But
wow, yeah, I've heard of the Loma Linda, right, where they all live well into their ripe old age.
Yes.
And then also, I remember in Canada, where I live in British Columbia, getting flyers in our mailbox about the book of Revelations. You need to come and hear this expert speaker. And I was raised in a Pentecostal fundamentalist Christian home. So whenever we got those flyers, my dad was so quick to say, it's a cult, it's a cult. But of course, he would never bother acknowledging that any of his views were culty. But I definitely remember that. And we had a Seventh-day Adventist school in my neighborhood right across from our public school. So that's the only reason I know about SDA. I'm surprised to know that they are as wealthy as they are as an organization, but it makes sense. They're probably getting a lot of free labor. And the missionary stuff. And so they're doing the mission work in countries or places that are really coping with poverty. People are in a desperate situation. And then they offer them help in one hand and a Bible in the other, and you don't get one unless you take the other. It's just so gross. But so
it's
thank
evil.
you for that
I
background.
Hate it. Yeah.
It's terrible. And so then what did that mean for you growing up? Did you I'm sure you had to attend services regularly. Did you also have to go to an SDA school, or what was it like for you?
Yes. Yeah. So part of their cultiness is, it's so funny. People think cults are like, a compound, and the Adventists don't have that, obviously, but they do have communities like Loma Linda, where pretty much everybody from the mail carrier to your doctor is an Adventist. And so I grew up in one of those communities at Berrien Springs, Michigan. Well, we moved around a lot, but but I ended up, my high school kind of formative time was in Berrien Springs, which is where the Adventist seminary is. So again, like everybody there is Adventist. Part of their behavioral controls is, we'll talk about, because they had a prophet who was at the same time or a little bit after Joseph Smith. And her, a lot of her behavior controls were, you couldn't go to movies. Everybody was vegetarian. You couldn't have well, back then there was no television, but it translated to no television, no music with a beat, all these, no bowling, no, all these rules. And so Berrien Springs, when I lived,
no mustard.
No
No
mustard.
mustard, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, no mustard, no spices of any kind, because that inflamed the bodily senses. And the Adventist church has always been obsessed with sex, and we'll get into that also.
Right. And the
But
Kellogg's,
that's it.
were they SDA? Yeah. Oh,
Yes.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Tell
John
me
Harvey
more.
Kellogg was one of the founding influences on the Adventist church, and he and Ellen White, the prophet, were very obsessed with diet to control lust. And so our little town that we grew up in didn't have a movie theater. It didn't have music stores. It didn't have bars, really. There were a couple maybe bars, kind of in the outside the Adventist circle. And so anyway, that was the way you were raised. It's very possible to go from birth to death as an Adventist and never really have any meaningful contact with anyone in the world. Even though they don't live in compounds, but they have their own publishers, they have their own vegetarian food makers, they have their own television channel. They obviously have their own music and just everything, their own books, their own education, all of that. So I was homeschooled, of course, until I was in about third grade. And then I went to Adventist schools from then on until I graduated from high school. And then I left the religion at about 18, and I just ran screaming, and I never went back.
Wow. So I'm thinking about the schooling then that you received. Some folks feel that they received a superior education through, I don't know, maybe they went to Catholic Jesuit priest high school or something, and so they were exposed to a lot of Latin and a lot of ancient texts and whatever. Does the SDA, where did they fall, do you think, as far as educating the children and the adolescents? Is it more indoctrination, or are they exposed to some broader views and ideologies?
I think there's a spectrum there. It's indoctrination first and foremost, absolute indoctrination. We had, and I think this is pretty typical for Adventist schools. Again, I'll just talk about high school, where every day started with chapel, which was singing and prayer and all of that stuff, and some little sermon-y thing for 20 minutes or something. Then every day you had 1 hour of religion class, which didn't cover any religions except the superior Adventist one. And then you went to school, or you went to church. Often you would go on Friday night, because Adventists, they think their big claim to being the chosen ones is that they observe Saturday as the Sabbath. And so from sundown Friday to sundown Saturday, they do nothing basically but worship God. You're not allowed to go swimming. You're not allowed to just do anything really. And so they think somehow they're so original on that. I don't know why they don't admit that Judaism has been doing that forever, but culty.
That's right.
But so then on Fridays we would have usually vespers on Friday nights, and then Saturday you would go to church, what they called Sabbath school, which was like a pre-church service and then church. And then often there was a Saturday night function. And that was your week. Like you had, and for us, we had family worship every night also. So you started school with religion. You had an hour of religion during the day. Then you had family worship at night. And then all day Saturday you worshiped. And so indoctrination for sure. I was very lucky at the time I went to the academy that I went to. We had an amazing principal who was scary as shit, but he was really academically focused. He really wanted academic excellence. And I think that's rare for the Adventist high schools, from what I've heard. So I felt like I got a very good education within the very limited Adventist spectrum. So of course you couldn't read the classics because they worshiped false gods, and they were gay, possibly. And
No.
and that you couldn't, obviously music, you couldn't study anything but classical music. Art, you couldn't study a lot of the art, and same with literature. Like I was an English major, of course I'm a writer, and I was dying to read what I knew other high school students were reading, like The Catcher in the Rye and things like that. And we didn't get to read much beyond like Dickens, and we got to read Shakespeare. That was like really, ooh. And science, same thing. Of course, they believe the Earth is 6,000 years old, and so we did have basic biology and chemistry, which I think a lot of Adventist schools didn't even have that. So
what about sex ed?
Oh, so let's talk about sex ed. Yes. So we had what was called marriage and family class, because of course you're not supposed to be having sex. You're supposed to be having marriages and families. So we had a chart that charted out over, I think it was 2 years. If you were dating for longer than 2 years, you basically had to time it so that you were going to get married, because boys would basically get blue balls after that, and they would just have to have sex. And so it was the girl's responsibility to control that whole path. And so the chart literally was like the first 6 months you could hold hands. And then once you were kissing, then it would proceed to French kissing. And oh my goodness, everything went downhill from there. And, so it was ridiculous. And we had a purity culture way before that term was, of course, available.
Right.
But the director, he wrote all the medical school manuals. He was the director of Loma Linda Medical School for, I think, more than 3 decades. His name was Harold Shryock. And he wrote a book called On Becoming a Woman. He also wrote one on becoming a man, but nobody ever read that, as far as I know. It was just the women. And in it, he was very violently anti-masturbation, anti-gay, of course, all those usual things. But for a medical doctor, he was saying that, being gay brought all kinds of mental illnesses and stuff, and masturbating made you lose your energy and made you listless, and, just all this bullshit that came from the Victorian times, came from Ellen White, which was shocking for a doctor, but whatever. And in that book, he actually advocated for female genital mutilation, FGM, to prevent masturbation.
God.
And I know that, and Adventists fight back with me and say, that's not true. He never did it. And it's like, oh, you think he put it in writing in a book and he never actually did it? Are you smoking crack? And there are, I think a lot of women didn't know it happened to them, and they just went through life like not knowing what actual sexual function is. Because there is a woman that did become outspoken about it in later life, and she said it happened to her at 3. She was discovering her sexual body parts at 3, and her grandmother had a fit and took her to an Adventist doctor and got everything cut off. So
wow,
there's a whole lot of that. Adventists were one of the pioneers of conversion therapy, and they still practice it to some, even though it's illegal in half the states. They offer it voluntarily. Right now, this makes me laugh so hard. The organization that they have right now that is pushing conversion therapy is called Coming Together Ministries.
Oh, that's quite a choice for a title.
Isn't that funny? Did anyone do any? Anyway, I love it. I think it's awesome.
Well, I'm truly shocked and horrified to learn that someone or people in the Seventh-day movement at times have advocated for female genital mutilation. That is truly horrific and horrifying. I would love to get some statistics on that. That's the type of thing I feel like needs to be made public. Because obviously the little girls who were having it done to them, they didn't ask for it to happen. They weren't wanting it to happen. This was a terrible assault against them. So that is just like, wow. And so were you raised with siblings, or are you an only child?
Yes. But wait, let me just close the loop on that thought.
Sure.
It's really hard to get statistics because I think for instance, my mother never went to a gynecologist except when she had babies. So there was no familiarity with her body parts didn't exist. So I think how many people from particularly my mother's time and had it happen and never ever knew. And so there's really, but it started with Kellogg. Kellogg also, advocated obviously for circumcising boys, but girls also. So, it was just an Adventist thing. And people think it doesn't happen in the United States, and it absolutely does. So then siblings, yes. So I have a sister, she's an older sister, and she is also absolutely not in the church anymore. And we have extraordinarily different personalities. And so it's been very interesting for us to kind of deconstruct together because our reactions, our memories, also our experience with our parents was so different because of just who we are. But it's been a real gift to have a sibling that you can go through that process with.
Right. And you mentioned when you well, graduated high school, I don't know, when you were around 18, that's pretty much when you left. Did you ever fully believe all the stories, the scriptures, whatever it was? Did you ever believe, or were you all the way along like, this is some kind of nonsense?
So I still ask myself that because I can't quite remember, but I didn't ever buy into it fully. I was always a perfectionist and a type A kind of like a people pleaser, and I always wanted to get my A+ no matter what. So I fully participated, but I don't think I believed. And I do. There were a couple of points where I know I was absolutely like, this is a crock of shit. And the first one came when I was about 10, and I was a competitive gymnast. And once you get up to a certain competitive level, the coaches don't want to spend any time with you if you're not going to go to all the meets and compete for them. And of course, all the meets were on Saturday, and we weren't allowed to go. So we were basically has-beens on the sideline by the time we were 10. And this was my biggest passion in life. And I just remember thinking, if there's a God, he's a sadistic, mean bastard, and I don't like him. Why would he do this to me? And if this is my church, then screw you. Why are you controlling me to this extent? And just all of that behavioral control of, even when I was very young, I knew it didn't, just intuitively, it doesn't make sense, a lot of the cult rules. Like, why couldn't I swim on Saturday? How stupid was that? And just all kinds of things didn't make sense. And then, of course, when I became a teenager and I discovered how terrified the adults were of us learning anything about the outside world, it all of a sudden became really clear to me that it was a fear-based religion, and it was control, and it wasn't spirituality. Sure, they were worried we wouldn't go to heaven, but mostly they just didn't want us to find. I mean, it was like Eve, I guess, in the garden. Like, what the fuck don't you want me to find out? And for me, that I leaned into that in the purity culture area, where that essay that you were reading from in the beginning was, when I just literally had not dated really anybody or had much experience at all. And I woke up as a senior and was just like, I'm going to have sex. This is bullshit. I'm just going to go find out what this is all about. And so I did. I went down to the local high school and I found a guy that I thought was the cutest thing in the world. And I was like, this is Operation Shred That Virginity. Let's get it out of the way, and let's see what they're all so scared that we're going to find out. And I think from there on, just like the house of cards just fell. It was like, this is ridiculous.
Did your parents, so you mentioned you and your sister have quite different temperaments and personalities.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did your parents see you as a problem child? Like, why can't she just be quiet and obey?
Yes. Yes. The short answer to that is, oh yes. I was the strong-willed child. They read all the Dobson, or my mom read all the Dobson books. And I was the strong-willed child. My will had to be broken. And so I was the one who got the corporal punishment and the really, the screaming fights and the slapped and all that stuff. My sister was 3 years older than I was and has a very gentle personality. And so I say in my book, and it still breaks my heart, but she literally, I think, broke her own will because she did not want to go through what she saw me going through with my mother. And she just decided it wasn't worth it. And she was just going to toe the line and be quiet. And so she suffered a lot, in a way, a lot more than I did, I think, because I've just always been very harsh, I guess. And so I met my mom's harsh with harsh, and she didn't have that. So she's had a really hard path. Well, I mean, which of us hasn't had a hard path?
Right, right. Well,
But
you
I
mentioned
was the terrible child.
well, I beg to differ, but you mentioned the two of the P words, the perfectionism and people pleasing, and from my experience, those are, especially as a one assigned female at birth, baked right into the fabric of Christianity. If you are a girl, if you are a woman, you had better learn how to serve and how to please others in your orbit. And you better learn to do it young and early. And so we do. We just gobble all that up because that's what we're being fed. And we also see life goes easier for us if we are able to do those things. And so it can be a combination of the indoctrination, the religious indoctrination, but also family of origin dynamics. And it can be hard to tease those apart, the religious trauma from the family of origin trauma. So I'm wondering then, when you turned 18 and you were like, bye, how did that impact the relationship with your folks? And how did you then just pay for yourself to go to a secular university, or what? How did it all happen?
Yeah, it's a super interesting, and I would imagine fairly unusual dynamic for Adventists, particularly conservative Adventists, the way we were raised. Yes, I absorbed all of that, like just submission. And it's interesting. I looked recently through the Ellen White. There's a database that you can search all of her writings, and the word submit is in there over 2,000 times, and the word submission is in there over 4,000 times. And it's almost always about women and children and your spirit, break your own spirit. You know, don't listen to your gut, just all that stuff, which of course we absorbed hook, line, and sinker. And that is there are a lot of arcs in my book, but that's one of the biggest ones, is that I took that particular submission thing and I followed it through. I left the church at 18 and I didn't actually figure out that I'd been playing that out in my secular life for 25 to 30 years. Like I just didn't, but I was always serving and pleasing and submitting to men and putting them on a pedestal, even when they weren't asking me to do that. I was doing it myself. And it ended up in a lot of very sadistically demeaning sexual relationships. And it's very odd because I am a very strong personality, and I do but it would be this pattern throughout my life of submit, take it, please, 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 until I just couldn't do it anymore. And there was absolutely nothing left for me in it. And then just like scorched earth. And so
Right.
the people who've been on the other end of that were always shocked after I'd been so
Right.
wonderful and so sweet for so many years. And that's their memory, is like, whoa, Melissa, she's like freaking, and they don't see the years and years of absolutely being a supporting character, if that, in everyone else's story, until I reached that blow up point, So anyway, there you go. So that was kind of what happened when I left the church at 18, was just like I'd been doing it all, checking all the boxes for that long. And then I was just like, bam, I'm out. And my parents, super odd. Once my sister and I were 18, we have all transitioned into a very don't ask, don't tell. We don't talk about religion. We don't talk about politics. We have a very lovely, somebody told me, it's like you have an acquaintanceship with your parents. And it's kind of true, like we don't have a deep relationship, but it's very easy. And it's never, of course, we were never, and nobody ever makes problems.
So
And
you do have this book coming out.
You what?
You do have this book. You do have this book coming out that is a memoir.
Yeah, well, there's that. Yes, we can talk about that. But my parents were there were some issues when I first left. My mom in particular, because her family always paid for our education, and she really wanted me to continue in the Adventist system, because how else would you meet an Adventist husband? And I just refused. And so there were some major damaging things going on there. But after that, she did eventually pay for my secular education. And ever since then, they've been very supportive. I mean, the choices I have made in life, they are not on board, but they've never criticized, and they've been supportive, this divorce or that problem, and they will extend any support they can. So I feel very, very fortunate in that way, because most people that were raised like I was are no contact at this point.
Yeah. Wow. That really is actually very, very fortunate. And also coupled with that, you have a sibling who has likewise deconstructed,
Yes.
deconverted, and so you can talk with each other. And then also, it's interesting that you have quite different memories of time spent with your parents, and that can be related to the different temperaments that you have, but also the fact that she's a little bit older, so your
Yes.
recollections might be quite different. But that's what you have to go on, is how things appeared to you
Right.
as a child when they were going on.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. And so then, um, did you stay living at home while you attended school, or did you move away to go to university?
I literally moved away about 2 months after I graduated from high school, and I never went back. I mean, for holidays and visits, but and that's another big difference, is my sister ended up staying at home until she was almost 30. And so that's how our experiences have been so different, even as adults. But I, there was the big deal about me wanting to go to a secular college and my parents not wanting. So the first year we compromised, and I went to the Adventist school in Austria, because I was just
In
like,
Austria.
yeah. So I was like, I'm just getting because I'd studied German in high school and French, and I was just like, or Spanish. And I was like, I'm just going to Europe. That's what I want to do. And so that was interesting. The European Adventists were a little more louche, I guess you could say. We were pretty much treated like boarding school kids in terms of locked in the dorm. The girls were anyway, locked in the dorm at night, etc. But on the weekends, they just let us run amok. We could just check ourselves out and we could like run to Paris for the weekend. And so that was a really great stepping stone for me, having never been outside the Adventist system. So of course, that's where I learned to smoke, because everybody does in Europe, and drink, and I just had a great time. And eventually we got found out, and so they were going to kick us out, and so I quit and came home before they could do that, because I had massive academic ambitions and I didn't want to kick out on my resume. So then after that, my parents agreed to send me to a secular college, and Mom paid for it. She pulled some power plays and yanked me out once, and that was really devastating. In my mind, that was where my life went off the rails in my secular life and never got back on. So that's sad, but but eventually I won that contest of of wills, and she put me back in school, and all of that's in the book. And so I did graduate and got my degree and all of that, but it was a rocky path. It was a lot.
And there was a marriage or two along the way, because you mentioned divorce.
Yes, yeah. So I was married twice. It's interesting. I've had kind of the exact same pattern of 10-year-long relationships, from 20 to 30, 30 to 40, and 40 to 50. And then I have been done with relationships. I learned my lesson.
Mm-hmm. Any kids in there?
Yes, yeah. I have kids that are adults now. I have 2 children, and it's one of my greatest pleasures and things that I'm the most proud of in life is that they are unrepentant little atheists that don't know. One of them asked me the other day, and I try not to talk about them because they deserve their own lives, and I don't want to, drag them into all of this. But one of them said the other day, asked me some basic question like, so baby Jesus was born in where? In a barn? And I was just like, oh my God, I did so well. Like, yeah.
Accomplished. Fantastic. Boy, I have 2 kids, and they had front row seats to my gong show deconversion. So they watched me go from being like wound tighter than a spring, with my head covering and my know this and know that and all the rules and everything, to suddenly being like, ta-da, we're getting dreadlocks and tattoos and smoking weed, and there's no rules. So yeah, kids have interesting stories to tell. So then, what has the reaction been from your kids, your sister, potentially your parents, to your book that's coming out?
To my book. So it's a very interesting time for the book to come out in terms of my relationship with my parents. I originally wrote the book 20 years ago and pitched it around, and it didn't sell. And my agent at the time told me to do it in a different way, and I seriously didn't want to affect my whatever relationship I had with my parents, so I just dropped the book. Now I'm very, very glad, because I know the character arc hadn't completed. I still needed that final 10-year relationship to fill in the blanks. And so it's a much better book now, but I really hadn't intended to ever sell it again, pitch it again. And I actually entered it on a whim in the book pipeline contest, and I won it. And so then I was like, oh, well, I guess I need to I need to finish this book then. And so I did. And it just so happens to be coming at the time when my parents, of course, are very old at this point, and both of them are starting to fail in various physical and mental ways. So it's not a great time to come out with this book, but It is my life. It is my choice. And they've made their choices. And so we're going to see how that goes.
Do they know about the book?
I told them several years ago that I was writing a memoir, but at this point, they don't retain things like that much. So I'm going to have to, obviously, before it comes out, sit down with them. And so that's a little dicey, honestly. And then the reaction of my other family members, I do have an uncle who has been out of the church longer than my sister and I, and was kind of our patron saint in terms of like when I was in school in Austria, he would send me a check for like $50 or something and say like, buy some Bibles, I mean beers. And so it was like, hey, uncle. So he's been wonderful. He's read it and has been very supportive. My sister has chosen so far not to read it. I gave it to her several years ago, and I think it's a little too much for her. I don't know if she ever will read it, and that's okay. At first, I was a little hurt and was like, this is my life, and you don't care to read about it. And then I really, in a lot of our succeeding conversations, have realized how much she's still dealing with, and also how much she sees some of it much differently than I do, and doesn't necessarily agree. So I guess we have another don't ask, don't tell there.
What about your kids?
Oh, interesting. Yeah. And then I do have other family members who've asked to be completely out of it. So I do not talk about them. They aren't in the book, and that is their choice. And I respect that. And then my kids have also not read it. And I said, you may want to read it, because if your friends all of a sudden come to you and are like, holy crap, your mom did what? You might want to read it. And they were like, you know what? Just going to go with it. Like, I don't need to defend you. I don't need to know you're my mom. And so that's been interesting. I tend to think that might change. They may, they're excited for me. They get all excited every little, milestone of like, oh, we signed, and oh, we got this. And, so they're very supportive of it, but
well, once you're on Jimmy Kimmel talking about your book,
there you go. Exactly.
And it's so interesting because so I have two daughters, and they're in their 20s, and one of them was like, I can't wait to read it. And she read like an advanced copy, and she wrote me this beautiful letter and put it on social media how proud she is. I mean, all this kind of stuff. The other one's like, she says, do you talk about having sex in that book? I said, mm-hmm. She said, then I won't be reading it. Thank you anyway. So one has no interest at all. And then my mom, I said to her, you don't need to read it. And she said, I want to read it. And I said, no, believe me, it's not going to be a blessing to your life. My mom is still a believer. And we had this back and forth a number of times. And then she said, my daughter wrote a best-selling book, and I want to have it on my shelf. And I was like, okay. I mean, I can't argue with that. I've already told you there are things in there that you probably won't really enjoy reading, but I love you. And if you want it, here you go. And I autographed it. I said, thanks for always loving me. And I have no idea if she has read it or not. I did see it beside her reading chair on a couple of occasions, and I just don't know.
Oh, wow. So she's never said anything. That's so funny. Wow.
No, other than she is proud of me. She has tried through the years really just to honor me and show me support. So even as a clinician, all my clients are people recovering from religious trauma. And she knows I founded the conference on religious trauma and the Shameless Sexuality Life After Purity Culture Conference. And I'm, holding these big events. And she says, I don't understand how how people can be so harmed. My Jesus would never. And she's always been extremely liberal. And no, her Jesus never would probably hurt anybody, but her Jesus is not the one that was my dad's Jesus. So she might not understand, but she does love deeply and wants to support me. So she just says, are you happy? How do you feel about things? How are your book sales going? This sort of thing. And then we talk about that for a little bit. And then we talk about whatever's going on in the retirement home, whatever the gossip is.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. Oh, kudos to her. Wow. Oh my goodness. Yeah. It's the sex thing, I think, more than anything. Like, that's where my kids balked too. They were just like, don't need to read a lot about your sex life, Mom. And they unfortunately had, like you said, courtside seats to a lot of the chaos in my life and a lot of the really awful, awful stuff that affected them so deeply. And so for them, they're like, we kind of don't need to go through it again. Everything's so calm and peaceful for us in the past 4 or 5 years. So why? And I respect that.
Yeah. Yes. Well, definitely. Yeah. Whatever they decide. For my oldest daughter who did choose to read it, the feeling I got from her was that it helped some aspects of me and my choices, my strange choices, to make sense when she was able to see them through the lens of here's what it was like to grow up in the family dynamic that I grew up in.
Yes.
And then I divorced their father when we'd been together about the 18-year mark, and that obviously was hard on everybody, hard on all 4 of us. But again, as she's looking back at it, she's saying, okay, yes, this now makes more sense. And for me, I came out of it and I just decided I would deny myself nothing. And I made good on that. I tried everything. We're going to try some drugs. We're going to try some group whatever. We're going to try all these things because I can do what I want to do. And so, I found it very liberating and exciting. And I carried like no shame around any of that. But that's not how it is for everybody.
Right.
So.
Right. No, I'm very firmly in that camp with you. And it's funny because again, my sister, and she's so different than I am. And like one of those Huffington Post excerpts, which I have not now put in this memoir. It's going in memoir number 2, which I was just talking to my editor about before I got on here. Was about going with one of my partners to brothels and for like absolute fun threesomes. And the book has so much sex in it and so much because it is integral to the story. And my sister is just like, why would you be sharing all of this with anyone? And to me, it just, it's my life. And I don't find any shame in it, but I also don't know why everyone is so Puritan about everything. And so I'm not gonna not talk about it. And so I do think that we're just wired possibly differently, and that's okay.
And there can be also great healing. It can be extremely cathartic when we do write our memoirs. And sometimes I had to stop and put it down for a few months because it was so hard, whatever I was remembering and writing about, and I just needed a break. And then I would come back a few months later and be ready to go again, but very cathartic. And then you're right. Also, temperament-wise, some people are extremely private. Why would you ever want to ever write about your own intimate details? And other people are like, I want to share this with everybody. And I had to think about when I was publishing my memoir, there may be potential clients, either people I'm already working with or people that may be wanting to work with religious trauma therapists in the future. They will be reading this, and how will it impact them? And so some of them may have had that response, looking at it going, ooh, why is she sharing this? I don't want to go to that person. other people have written me from around the world and said it was such a relief to read something. It was refreshing. It was so honest. I did not try and portray myself in a fantastic light. I just told, here's what my journey was like. Boy, oh boy. I mean, if I had it to do over, I might do some things differently, but
Yeah.
probably not a heck of a lot. And I want people to know it's possible to move on. We just grow and we change. And as we learn and we know better, then we do better. We make different choices and we don't have to feel shame.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think particularly when we're writing about purity culture, uh, why hedge your bets? Like the whole point is to bust out of it. So if you're going to show a lot of restraint while writing about purity culture, what's the point? I guess in my estimation. And yeah, I mean, same thing. I don't think I come out looking great. But that wasn't the point. And I think that's not the point of any good memoir, right? If you come out looking great, either you lied or it's boring. Nobody wants to hear that everything was really great and fabulous and you did everything right. Nobody can learn from that. And so I think for us, it was the truth, right? We need to tell the truth for hopefully it will help other people. Hopefully it helps us. But I don't know how else to be. I don't know how to make that palatable, I guess. And it's not going to
Right.
be for everybody, for sure.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And that's okay. I'm not everybody's cup of tea, even though it's kind of shocking. That so I don't expect that a book about my life will also be everybody's cup of tea, and that's just fine. Were there any resources, either books or shows, or even people that you kind of looked to throughout your deconstruction or deconversion experience? Was there anything that was helpful for you? Was anybody even writing about it back then?
Well, it's interesting because I didn't deconstruct really until just about COVID time. I left the church and I thought, la, I'm free. Everything just dropped away and I'm magically like a person who's never been touched by religion. Look at me go. And that didn't obviously work. It ended up in repetitive patterns that were really awful. And so thus the book. And so I didn't actually start deconstructing until 5 years ago or so. And it was the online deconstruction community, I have to say, was just so eye-opening. I'd never heard the term purity culture before then. I'd never heard the term deconstruction. And I got on just to talk about the weird religion I grew up in. I started the glory hole because the name amused me, and I just thought I'm going to start talking about how weirdo Ellen White, who got hit in the head with a rock and thought she was inspired by God, and I'm just going to vent. And then it kind of took off from there. I met other ex-Adventists, but mostly just general deconstruction community, and it was just incredible. I can't say how great it was. And then I learned about Marlene Winnell, and I had never known about her. And then part of the book that we didn't speak on yet was something that kind of kicked off my deconstruction, even though it took me 10 years to get to the deconstructing part, was in my like mid-ish 30s. I found out that a family member of mine who had been working for the church had been a serial child predator. And
Oh no.
I had adored him. Everyone adored him. He was just the most magical person. And so how could this happen? And so that made me and I had been firmly ignoring anything religious or church up until that point. And that kind of kicked some stones loose for me in terms of, ooh, what is this? First of all, what is the family I was raised in? And secondly, what was the church? Because the church had enabled him as they all do. They had, done the classic thing, moved him to a new place where he repeated the behavior, and moved him to, and shamed the girls, and just the whole 9 yards. And so it took me many years to actually be like, I really need to look at this. And part of that was that I actually found and befriended one of the victims of that family member. And she really, really pushed me eventually to be like, you need to look at both your family history and what has happened to you and how you were raised, and look at the church. And she was the one that pointed out to me about the Harold Shryock's book saying, FGM for, and I'd read that book as a teenager. I didn't ever see that I didn't know what he was talking about. And so she was incredibly instrumental, and really kind of pushed me to do it, but also gave me resources that I didn't have in terms of church history, family history, just everything. And that was immensely helpful.
Wow. And this also, when you really started earnestly tugging on that thread to unravel it all, was also around COVID time. I
Yeah.
mean, we're in a worldwide pandemic, which has everybody thrown off, and everything's topsy-turvy. And actually, I would say a majority of people who are reaching out to me nowadays, that's what kicked off their journey. So, because for a lot of them, that's when they couldn't be attending services in person. And so then they were just watching services from home. And then eventually they're like, oh, I'm not even going to bother doing that. And then once they had some distance between the teaching, sitting under that teaching all the time, and being able to have some peace and quiet and think for themselves, that's when they realized, oh, actually, I don't want anything to do with this. And that it can be a hallmark of a cult as well. Steve Hassan talks about that, how what it took for him was being in an accident and being in the hospital to kind of shake him loose from the cult that he was involved in, which was the Moonies, or the Unification Church. And then that set him on his path of the cult expert kind of work that he does today. Yeah. And I'm so glad you mentioned Dr. Marlene Winnell as well. And her book is called Leaving the Fold, and her group is called Journey Free. And she's a dear friend and a mentor to me on my own journey as well. And Marlene has spoken at a number of my events. And I'm just so grateful to people like her, and also Daryl Ray, who founded Recovering from Religion, another very important organization in the United States, for people who are waking up to the fact that religion is not just benign. It is often malignant. It can even be deadly for some people. And so these groups provide support, as I provide support, also including free support groups for people who need some help. They're figuring out what just happened to me. How did I ever get sucked into that? Why did I stay in so long? What can my life look like moving forward if I don't want to bring religion with me? So it's heavy work, heavy navigating that people are doing.
It really is. And you just never know when you start pulling that thread, like you said, what it's gonna, I thought I was just gonna figure out a little bit about my family and really kind of acknowledge, like, oh, the church is bad. I really thought that was where I was going to end up. And at the time, I was in an extremely abusive relationship, and started to realize that was part of it, like my submission thing and so then I had to look at the relationship, and then I had to look at, who I had become. And, you just start pulling the threads, and all that indoctrination it takes over your life, or it is your life, really, even when you think it's not, unless you focus and do the work. I hate that phrase, do the work, but You really, really have to.
Yeah, yeah. It feels like deconstruction is pulling threads and connecting dots. That's what it's like as we take everything apart and then kind of start to actually see things for what they are, including, how we got into some of the unhealthy relationships that we may be in with codependency and other things. So how can people find you and your book? Tell us more about all that.
Oh, yes. Okay. So the book pre-orders open sometime in January 2026. Not quite sure yet. I don't know when this episode will come out, but if so, if it's around then, we can certainly drop the link to. But I am on TikTok and Instagram as The Glory Hole. As Janice pointed out at the beginning, WHOLE. You want to make sure you get that W in there, because otherwise you might come up with some really funky stuff. And you can always find me on my publisher's website, Lake Drive Books. That's where, in fact, you can go there right now, even before pre-orders open. And there's a little email form on my page, and you can sign up to be notified when pre-orders open for Holy Disobedience. And I am also on Substack, and that is not The Glory Hole. That is just my author name, Melissa Duge Spiers.
Wow, beautiful. And now you're even thinking of part 2 of the memoir. So this is very exciting. I can't wait to rush out and get my copy of your first one. I just feel so strongly that it's going to do very well sales wise. And maybe we'll even get you back here in the next year or so to talk about how things have gone since the book has been
I would love
released.
to come back. Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
thank you. It's been such a pleasure to have you on.
What's that?
It's been such a pleasure to have you on today.
Oh, thank you so much. I really do hope that the book does well. Obviously, I mean, for authors of our level, it's not like we're going to get rich, but my dream is that it opens the floodgates for more Adventists, in particular, Seventh-day Adventists, to feel safe enough to put their stories out, because no one really has yet. It's scary to speak out against them. They're very litigious. They're very rich. They're very awful. And my biggest hope with my book is that it is soon buried under a stack of other ones, that just, I hope documentary filmmakers come and say, we want to make a film on this church that nobody has. I hope, publishers start going, where's our next author about the Adventist church? That's my dream.
Oh, yes. And for anyone who has really enjoyed this episode, they might also appreciate an earlier Divorcing Religion podcast episode where I spoke with Dr. Coco Owen, who is a psychologist in the United States, and she grew up also an Adventist. And so her story is also very interesting. So people can go to the YouTube channel, Divorcing Religion YouTube channel. And I do want to let folks know, too, if you are deconstructing or even questioning deconstruction, I have just published a new resource called The Ultimate Deconstruction Guide and Workbook. It's available on the Divorcing Religion website. I hope that it helps so many people. It would have helped me. I wish I would have had something like that when I started this journey 17 years ago. Any final words from you, Melissa, before we say goodbye?
I don't think so. I think just big kudos to anyone who's deconstructing. It's a major and admirable and very taxing thing. Don't feel like you have to do it every day, all day long. It's okay to just sometimes float for a little while. It's always going to be there.
Yeah, excellent point. That's so true. And then also there's a lot of content on social media to support people who are walking this journey of deconstruction, deconversion. And of course, anyone who wants to book sessions with me, I'm available. And I do offer a free support group as well, the Divorcing Religion website. So thank you again, Melissa. What a pleasure to have you on today. And let's keep in touch.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much. It was a great conversation.
And thank you, everyone, for joining us. We'll talk to you again soon. Take care. Website. So thank you again, Melissa. What a pleasure to have you on today. And let's keep in touch.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much. It was a great conversation.